and we'll be archiving them up on the web at the OMH website, so people will be able to take a look at those later. I'd like to thank some people today. I'd like to thank Candace Stellato. She's our statewide ACT team person here at OMH in Albany, and she initially had invited us to do these listening forums last year. So I want to thank her for reaching out to us. I'd also like to thank the New York Association of Psychiatric Rehabilitation Services, also known as NIAPers. Their staff were very helpful in facilitating these. I'd also like to thank the recipient affairs specialists in all the regions. They were also very helpful in facilitating these forums. I'd also like to thank Tom O'Clair, who is multitasking right now. He should be in a moment, and he will be providing some support today for the webinar. So a brief introduction for people who haven't attended webinars, or if this is a little new to you. You will only be hearing my voice today. You are all on listening mode, so everyone else is muted right now. We can still make this somewhat interactive. People can send in questions, and my support staff here, Tom O'Clair, who just walked in, and I thank you, Tom, will help to answer the questions. We'll also take a break during the webinar to answer any questions. So if people have questions, just type them in as we go along. If there is a particular slide that you want to draw attention to that you had a question about, please note the number of the slide, and then we can go back to it and discuss it. Hang on one sec. All right. All right, and I think with that, I think we're all set to go. So, as long as I can get my computer working. Let's see. All right. Okay, you. All right. So here's our agenda for today. We'll go over an overview. We'll talk about the goal of the forums, the challenges of being a peer specialist, some of the common themes that were in all of the regions, and then some other important points. We'll talk about some strategies before hiring peers, some strategies after hiring peers, and then we'll talk about peers and the fidelity scale. The fidelity scale is specific to ACT teams, but most of the things that we'll talk about today are pretty generalizable to peer specialists all over, or peer bridgers. All righty. Okay, so here's the overview. Recipient affairs and NIAPers were asked by Candace Stellato, as I said before, to do some regional listening forums. They wanted to know how are peers being used on the ACT teams. We didn't have, some of the places didn't have trainings, a list of trainings and core competencies. They didn't have job descriptions, so we were looking to work on some of that stuff and get an idea of what was happening with peers on the team. And the main overall question that we asked people, there were a number of questions that we asked, but the main overarching one was, are people being used? And the way that people were being used, is it reflective? Because we were assuming that there's a lived experience of mental illness and then a learned experience of recovery. So that's what we were really trying to find out, is how are peers being utilized on the team? All right, good. My arrows are working now. So the information, as I said, was to be used to develop some job descriptions, identify some core competencies, identify any necessary orientation trainings, not only for peers, but also for staff and recipients and other people on the team. Identify necessary ongoing trainings, such as this one, or these webinars that we're doing. And recommendations for other strategies to support the work and the role of the peer specialist. And we'll talk about those at the end. So here's really the crux of it. Everyone should be seeing a unicorn on their screen right now. And for anyone who's not sure what a unicorn is, I wanted to make sure I had a picture for you. So let me explain this a little bit. When I worked as a peer coordinator, when I took over the job of peer coordinator. The peers that we had working were primarily doing a lot of transportation, doing a lot of gopher work. They're also doing some case management light, I would call it. And I didn't really see people being activated, you know, with that that specialness. So what we did is we had like a little in-house meeting, only us peers, and what I told people was that what we are is we're unicorns, you know. We're very special people. We have a magical quality about us. And what I mean by that is that we have gone into the land of mental illness, and we have lived in that land for a little while. We've been in that dark forest. And what's most important is that we've been able to come back to talk about it. So we're sort of like the master of both worlds, you know, and we can be a translator for experience from one land to the other land and then back again. So that was a critical role for us, and it's a magical quality that only a few of us really have and can articulate. So the problem is that because the staff and other recipients and even ourselves had never really seen anything like this before, they were relating to us in ways that were familiar to them, like transportation specialists and gophers, you know, and doing some of the case management light stuff. So they weren't relating to us as unicorns. They were relating to us as horses with tumors on our head. And it was our job to show people, everybody, the staff and recipients, what that special quality was, what we were really capable of, you know, growing ourselves, developing confidence in our abilities, validating our experiences, and being a translator for both worlds, and to keep people on track with recovery and showing people that recovery really is possible. So with that, that's going to be kind of like our focal point for today's discussion, is that idea of the magical quality of a peer specialist and the unicorn concept. Okay, so let's go through. These are some common themes. These were these were universal in all of the regions in New York State. So with the exception of the Western region, the attendance was low. The peers did not seem to have a particularly strong sense of identity or role when we asked them our questions. There was also a high emphasis on compliance with medication from peers. There was a number of people. There was at least, you know, one or two people in each region that stated that part of their job was to, when someone was non-compliant with medication, that part of their job, they were being asked to go in and talk to the person to convince them to take their medication. And although this was a listening forum, so it wasn't really our place at OMH to comment on that, I will comment on it now. It is not our job as peer specialists to convince people to take their medication. It should actually be the other way around. We should be explaining, we need to explain to staff, to psychiatrists, we need to explain to them why somebody would have some decisional conflict around taking medication, and start a dialogue around the ambivalence of medications, and, you know, just how strong medications can affect somebody, and how the side effects may be interfering with what is really important for that person. So next thing, there were no real clear statements on the agency's ethics and boundaries policies. One of the questions that we asked in each region, excuse me a moment, I need a drink of water. One of the things that we asked was, okay, so what if we had a recipient of services and they were someone who was also had a substance abuse problem, and they used, and they got into they know that if they get tested at their program, or if they tell anyone, or if anyone finds out about it, they're going to get kicked out of their housing, or they're going to get kicked out of their treatment program, or something like that. So if they tell that to the peer, you know, and they say to the peer, I need you to keep that a secret and not tell anyone, And this was a pretty common. Everyone seemed to relate to this question, that this was something that would happen commonly, where they would be asked to keep secrets. What was their role? What were they supposed to do in that situation? And there wasn't like a clear statement on what the agency's ethics and boundaries were around that, what the policy was around that. And what people said was, and I thought this was really right on target, was people said, well, I would just tell the person that, look, I'm part of a team, and I need to tell them that. And we need to try and work through this, and negotiate with your landlord, or negotiate with your program to try and work through this. So that people knew right up front, that recipients knew right up front where the peers' boundaries and ethics were, and where their responsibilities were. Could that interfere? It's a balance with trust, because if we're peers, we've had an experience, and we can talk the talk to people who have had similar experiences, who are in our programs. So is that going to interfere with trust? It might, but if we put things right out on the table about what our roles are, that seems to be the best way to do it. More common themes. People in the jobs previously had, and this is their words, crack-ups. And we're going to talk a little bit about crack-ups later on, and how maybe we can activate some ADA regulations, some reasonable accommodations to help people avoid crack-ups. And then the last thing is, peers are working, and that the value of that particular role modeling was hardly mentioned at all as important. Nobody really brought it up that that being in a job was valuable, and that we can role model to people, because we know that work is very, very good for people, for people's mental health, and we know that we have very few people working. Also, one of the peers thought that they were going to lose all their benefits, and that's obviously a mistake. So for people to learn more about benefits, I think we felt that it was pretty crucial for peers to know about benefits, not only for their own self, because that creates a lot more stress if you think you're going to lose everything because you're working, but also to teach other people, how they can go back to work if that's something that they would like to do. So we're actually going to have some information at the end of this training for people to see where they can go for some free benefits trainings that comes out of this office. Okay, some more common themes. Peers did not see a career path as a peer specialist. This can lead to burnout, hopelessness, and turnover. It can lead to people trying to be like other staff, because if your only way to move up in the world at your program is to be like a case manager and make more money as a case manager, then you start acting like a case manager, and that's not helpful for recipients. And again, there were perceived job responsibilities, but not perceived equal pay. And I don't know if that's specific to just peers or if that's sort of a general thing. I think that happens in a lot of places, and I don't think that's specific to peers. But in spite of all that, there was a clear expression that the peers were dedicated and caring, and that they really loved what they do. And that was quite heartening for me. Here's some other important points. We talked about stigma, and how does the team relate to the peer? How do other providers relate to the peer? In one region, when peers would go with people to, say, like Social Security or Department of Social Services, when they would accompany the person to that appointment, and they would tell the person, what the person at the door, the security guard or whomever, what they were there for, what their role was. It took them forever to explain what a peer specialist was, and they found it was just easier to say that, well, first of all, if they said they were an advocate, that would turn into like a situation, because apparently advocate can be a very reactionary word for some folks. So they would just say they were social workers. So they were they were starting to lose their identity already, just because other people didn't understand what they were, and they weren't able to articulate it to folks. So we need some education around that, obviously. So how do recipients relate to the peer? How do the recipients of the program understand that role? Because for some people, they've never even had the concept of recovery, or that people could come out of this dark forest and relate back. And then how does the peer specialist relate to the team and the providers and recipients? Is there a less than mentality? It seemed like there was a little bit of a less than mentality, like, well, you're just a peer, you know. Okay. So some more important points that we found. Again, these weren't universal in every region, but they came up enough where we wanted to bring it up. The use of language. Language is obviously very important. Language influences thoughts. It influences actions. So at times people didn't seem to be speaking in their own voice. People seem to use cliches a lot. And, you know, that can be okay to use those in some situations. I'm hoping that people weren't using it in their day-to-day interactions with recipients. You know, one day at a time, you know, one step at a time. All those things are they're very good. Positive affirmations are all very good, but it seemed like there was a little inauthenticity behind that when we use cliche when we're trying to develop a real working relationship with folks. If the positive affirmation or the thing doesn't connect with somebody, then we have to find some other personal things and share our own personal experiences with folks to make that connection. There was also a lot of clinical terminology. Words like decompensating to describe what was happening with folks, referring to people as borderlines, referring to people as patients. You know, there was a lack of person-centered, recovery-oriented language. So we were talking about people in terms of high functioning or low functioning, schizophrenics, and talking about people in terms of compliance. These are not pure. This is not pure language. Okay, this is not person-centered language. You know, a person with a diagnosis, a person diagnosed with schizophrenia, or a person diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, those are more person-centered things, even though they are still clinical, but they're termed with the person first. Okay. There was some confusion around billing, and I'm confused around billing. I tend to get a little fuzzy when I see numbers, so I don't know if I'll be able to help people too much with this. But peers said they were called on when when a recipient needs to be with a staff person for a long time. Peers were told that this was because staff need to do a certain amount of 15-minute visits per person per month. But what I was told was that peers are able to be part of the billing process, so they can bill that. ACT teams can bill for peers when peers visit with someone for 15 minutes or more. So that could be part of the thing. There was also confusion around subcontracting. So what we mean by that is that there would be an organization that trains peer specialists or trains peers. The parent agency that has the ACT team would subcontract or contract with the peer agency to have a peer specialist on the ACT team. And then the question was, which agency am I working for? You know, am I working for the ACT team, the agency that has the ACT team, or I'm working for the agency that I was hired out of, the peer agency? And then who does the supervision? So people were having like 2 supervisors. Sometimes what would happen is what people learned at the peer agency around recovery wasn't being actualized in at the ACT team. So there was a conflict, or they were being asked to do things that were in direct conflict with the values that they learned at the peer agency or at the peer specialist training agency. Also, if you have 2 supervisors, you have no supervisors because there was some conflict there between supervision styles. And then obviously this seemed to create a sense of fear and ambiguity around what people are supposed to be doing and create anxiety and stress that really was unnecessary. People need to know who they are accountable to, and it needs to be one agency or the other. Okay, some more important points. This is specific to ACT teams, but I think it's fairly generalizable to other agencies and other types of programs. The style of team leaders, we look at this as task versus process. So for team leaders, they're put in a situation where they have a lot of tasks. They're in a task-oriented program type. So they and what we mean by that is, you have a checklist of things, and you kind of check off this task was done, this task was done, this task was done. So we have a lot of things going on there. Process is more of a relationship thing. There may not be a clear sense of what is, whether or not the job has been done or not when there's a process. Most of us peers kind of understand what that means. We meet with somebody for a long time. We don't know if we've done any good or not. We kind of work with people for a long period of time. And we don't really know if there's been any. There's nothing to put a check mark next to. So. People can come in and out of our lives. We're not really sure. We don't get any feedback back on that. So for most peer specialists, our strengths lie in helping people with processing information and building relationships, integrating back into the community. Those are all process kinds of things. They're time-consuming, obviously, and measuring a success can be somewhat ambiguous. For some people, they felt pressured that if they spent a long time with someone and then that person ended up in the hospital, that they were blamed a little bit for that. That well, you spent all this time with them, why did they still end up in the hospital, or why did they still have a relapse with substance abuse? So some people felt responsible for that, and obviously we can't be responsible for someone else's behavior. For team leaders who evaluate staff by the number of tasks completed, number of visits done. You've done this, you've done that, you've done the other thing. It can create some unproductive stress for peers. And what we have to realize is that obviously both task and processing are important. So one of the things that we talk about here is not so much, what we talk about is not so much, well, did this person do the thing or didn't they do the thing, or they said they were going to do this. We have to look at this in terms of planting seeds. So what we're doing right now is our job is, the task, if you really want to look at it that way, is to plant as many seeds as possible, as many seeds of hope as possible, as many seeds of possibility, as much skill teaching that we can, as much practice around different things that we can. Sometimes if people are anxious around something, if people are challenging some old ways of thinking and old ways of doing things, and people have been used to coping by, cutting or using drugs or alcohol, that could be a threat, and people may turn back to those safe behaviors, and that's not a failure. That's a person starting to develop some ambivalence, and that's a good thing. So our task is to really plant as many seeds as possible. We don't know. We may never see them bear fruit. We may never understand or know what kind of an impact we had on people. We can all look back to teachers that we've had. I'm sure all of us have had one or two teachers that just had a profound connection because they cared, and we can remember those folks. So that's kind of whatever it was that they taught us is still with us. We still remember them. So that's the type of person that we're looking for when we're talking about peer specialists and task versus process. All right. So I'm going to get into strategies before hiring peer specialists. So if there are any agencies or any people out there that are looking to hire peer specialists, this is specifically targeted for you. It's also helpful for people that have peer specialists now, because there's some good things in there. If you're not doing them, you can do them. You can still kind of pick it up, do like a grandfather clause kind of thing with them. So, and then after I get done with this section, we'll stop for some questions. Do you have any questions?
I've been answering some as we go.
Okay. So we'll stop for some questions, and then we'll get back into it. All right. So question number one here. So why do we have peer staff? Why should an agency have peer staff? Obviously, it's an affirmative hiring thing, and it creates jobs for those of us with disabilities. There's role modeling involved, right? That's pretty cut and dry. You've got people who can provide hope. There's buttons that some of us wear called that say I'm a walking miracle. A lot of people have recovered from severe mental illness and can give back to the community and want to give back to the community, and that's a big part of their recovery. There are unique perspectives and contributions to the team. People peer staff are able to are generally able to relate to trauma. Most of us have had some trauma in our lives. We can help other people understand how particular actions or particular situations could be upsetting for a person. We can help put that into context for them. We can help, like I was saying earlier, about helping put things into context, like a hospitalization or a substance abuse relapse, so that is not necessarily a bad thing. That could be a good thing. Depends on the context. And then employees with disabilities also have higher retention rates. We know there's a lot of turnover in our field. So next thing, creating the positions. Obviously, we need a job description and a clear definition of the qualities needed for the job. That's pretty critical. I mean, that should be no different than any other position that people hire for. So one of the places that did a good job with this was a place in Pennsylvania. They brought in the stakeholders of the community. So they brought in recipients, they brought in staff from the various programs, the hospital and whatnot, because the hospital was looking to hire peer staff. So they, what they did was they asked people, well, what would we have the peers do? And they didn't have an answer. After some hemming and hawing and this, that, and the other thing, they come up with, well, sometimes people don't show up for their appointments, so we could have the peers call people at home and remind them that they've got an appointment the next day. It's like, well, come on, I got a computer program that does that for me. That's what my doctor's office does for me. They just have a computer telephone service that calls me. So what can you really have them do? That again is going to activate that unique quality. So we really want to make sure that we understand what it is that we want people to do, and what is it that is going to activate that lived experience of mental illness and the learned experience of recovery. People need a clear understanding and defined expectation of the unique role of the peer, which is basically what I just said. A consideration of the advantages of having a peer and maximizing the utilization of their uniqueness. A consideration of the potential need for ongoing peer support. That's another thing that can help people avoid the crack-ups that we talked about earlier. It's a very unique position, and it's very difficult when you're just kind of there by yourself. So having a connection to the community is very, very important. It's an ongoing thing. And then the importance of supervision, which I was talking about earlier with the task versus process stuff. People can become, everyone can become a little demoralized when we work here. Sometimes we need our little things. I have a little flashlight that I refer to. I have it hanging around my neck to remind me of the light that's inside each of us that sometimes gets dark for a little while, and that sometimes what we have to do is we have to hold the light for others, and we all know people that have held the light for us. So we all need little things like that, and that's something that supervision can help with. Hiring considerations. Obviously, we want people who are competent, who have some formal training, and that's actually one of the reasons why we're doing these webinars throughout the year. We will be providing people with certificates of attendance or participation. We'll send that to people. People can add that to their resumes as they're out there looking for either new positions, new peer positions, or if they're looking to advance. We want people. You want to look for people who have demonstrated skills. Whether it's public speaking or active listening skills, whatever it is that you're looking for, and that to keep in mind that there's an acquired knowledge. So I put down forensic peer specialists here because we have advocated for forensic peer specialists. Now at OMH, I'm sure most people know that there's a criminal background check when you work for state government, and they do fingerprinting, and we have advocated for forensic peer specialists. And if you're a forensic peer specialist, that means that you have to have some criminal history. So we've been able to advocate for people with a criminal history to to get jobs as peer specialists here. So that's something to keep in mind, you know. I mean, obviously, again, you want the right person. You don't want somebody who just came out. You want the right person for the job. The idea of chronological resumes, some of us have been hospitalized, so there may not be chronological resumes. There's another condition that happens too. My wife has about a 9-month gap while she was sick with child. So that's something that happens quite frequently. And then the other thing is entitlement considerations and fringe benefits. For people who have, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but for people who have Medicaid buy-in, then the agency doesn't have to pay for medical benefits for the person. I'm told that that's correct. Thank you. All righty. Next page here is hiring dues. What we do want to do is we want to evaluate each candidate for the job based on whether or not they have met the employer's expectations and requirements for the job. Such things as we said already, education, training, employment experience, skills, and or licenses. Consider whether a person with a disability can perform the essential functions of the job with or without a reasonable accommodation. And we'll talk about reasonable accommodations in a moment briefly. And then recognize that there are often many ways to accomplish the same task. I think it was either MacArthur or Patton that said something along the lines of, don't tell somebody how to do a job, or don't tell them how to do it. Tell the person what you need done and let them surprise you with their creativity. So, in other words, micromanaging is usually not. Okay. Hiring don'ts. So we don't want to assume that certain jobs are more suited to persons with disabilities. We don't want to assume that a person cannot or does not want a particular job because of apparent or non-apparent disabilities. We don't want to assume that a person with a disability does not have the requisite education and training for a job. I know a number of people with masters and PhDs. Don't hire a person with a disability who is not qualified to perform the essential functions of a job, even with a reasonable accommodation. So in other words, we don't want to hire someone just because they're a nice person or to give someone a break that could actually blow up in our face later on. So we want the right person for the job. And so basically what we're saying here is be person-centered, right? And make it about the person and asking questions. Orientation. So how are traditional staff oriented to the new role or position when you're creating a new role or position? How are peer staff oriented to the new role or position when an agency has limited peer staff experience? These are questions that need to be answered before you hire peer staff. How are supervisors oriented to the unique nature of this peer position? How are they going to relate to people during supervision? How are they going to help people get back on track when the despair hits? You know. Let's see. Alrighty. So reasonable accommodations. Once an employee with a disability is part of the workplace, there are many resources available to provide accommodations and help maintain that person's productivity. Many employees who experience an illness or injury can remain on the job if an employer has an understanding of the value of retention and the availability of accommodations. Employers can save time and money by tapping into available resources on retaining employees after an illness or injury. So I know that when we talk about reasonable accommodations, there have been times from personal experience where because it's a legal thing, that really puts people's hackles up, and it puts the defensives up, especially if people have been sued before. This can create, if there's not a good understanding of what a reasonable accommodation is, people can get a little tweaky about it. So they can go either they can go in one direction and be over accommodating and not talk and allow the person to escape doing the essential functions of the job, or they can go in the other direction and make the person not want to scare the person into not asking for a reasonable accommodation. I've seen both of those things happen. So for people, the best remedy for that is is information. So what I have here is some information on the Job Accommodation Network. Excuse me. It's a free service of the Office of Disability and Employment Policy at the U.S. Department of Labor. So there's a website there and a phone number. And let's see, and I'm on their email list, so you can actually get on their email list, and they'll send you regular updates. So this is for any particular disability. It's not necessarily just psychiatric disabilities, but they do some individualized technical assistance for people. Okay. So a couple of facts around reasonable accommodations. Again, these are all good things to make ourselves aware of. This will help people in the job avoid crack-ups, as that we talked about before. We can reduce unproductive stress and unneeded stress. Stress is always going to be there, but we don't have to increase it. So a March 2003 survey of employers found that the cost of accommodations was only about $500 or less, so it's not that much. 73% of employers report that their employees with disabilities did not require accommodations at all. One thing about reasonable accommodations as it relates to peer specialists is that it would be considered a reasonable accommodation for a peer specialist to attend a peer specialist conference. So in Buffalo this year, back in October, we had the Alternatives Conference, which is a peer conference. It happens every year. Previous year it was in St. Louis. Next year I think it's in Kansas. I'm not sure. And New York City also does a peer. They've done two peer specialist conferences over the summer. They've got a third one coming up this summer. So there was someone from another region who wanted to go to the New York City Peer Specialist Conference, and that could have been done via a reasonable accommodation. And I don't have all the details on how we could do that, but if people want to call the office, we could certainly get you some more information on that. But because of the unique nature of the position of peer specialist and the way it's still kind of developing, it's really critical for us to have a connection to the peer community, to the recovery community, and we've got some other strategies that we've come up with to help people with that, and we'll be getting to that in a minute. And okay, so this is strategies after hiring. So after we've hired peer specialists, these are some of the things that we need to look out for. And before we get into that, there's like two more sections. There's the strategies after hiring, and then peers and the fidelity scale, peer specialists and the ACT team fidelity scale. So let's stop right now, take some questions, and then we'll get through the rest of this, and then at the end we'll take some time for some more questions for folks. So Tom, do you have any questions?
We've got a lot of questions.
All right, we got a lot of questions.
You want to go with Richard's first one?
Yeah.
As peer specialists, what should we be focused on while working in adult homes?
So the question is, as peer specialists, what should we be focused on while working in adult homes? So adult homes are a little different than ACT teams. Based on my understanding and my experience is that there's not as much of a focus on recovery and transition. So that's the limitation of the webinar is, if this was a training, I would just say, well, what do other people think? Unfortunately, I can't get off the hook that easy. So again, so what I'll say is, I'll just say this is just my opinion about that, and not necessarily couched in any particular science or evidence-based practices. Is that we're still role models. We can still provide hope for people. I think our job as peer specialists in adult homes is to still help people get out into the community, get connected to things that they've said that were important to them, and connect with them in that way. So I don't see a huge difference. People may start, once people start getting connected to their community via spirituality or volunteering at the library, or volunteering at the SPCA, or getting involved in things that they had said that they were interested in when they were younger, and just getting people to open up and talk, and helping people connect with their communities, I think is probably one of our strongest things that we can do for people in adult homes. We are doing something at OMH to help people transition out, for people who are ready to transition out of adult homes. So we do have some support there for folks.
Okay, next question. Is it the peer specialist's role to get ACT team recipients to take their medication from the direction of ACT team staff?
Okay, so the question is it the role of the ACT team peer specialists to get recipients to take their medication at the direction of the ACT team staff? And as I had mentioned earlier, if people hadn't heard me, that was something that people brought up. And it is not the role of us to get people to do anything, really. It is not the role of a peer specialist to get people to do anything. People will direct their own care and direct their own trajectory towards recovery. For some people, medications are helpful. For some people, medications are not helpful. For some people, medications are helpful for a little while, and then they're not helpful anymore. It's all kind of all over the place. And again, so I'll just say again, this is my my personal take on that is, when the subject of medications comes up, generally the way I frame it for people when they're talking about medications and the recovery process, the way I generally try to frame it for people is to not fetishize the medication. So if people are saying that the medications are what's going to make you well, and that the power of recovery is in the medication, I would challenge that. I would say that we would not want to fetishize the medication, that the power to recover and heal is within the person, and the person will know what's best for them. And we need to listen to a person if they're having some conflict around medication. Some of this stuff is influenced by some of what I'm saying is influenced by Pat Deegan's Common Ground training and some of her stuff that she's done. She's done some pretty extensive stuff around medications and what she calls personal medicine. So what we find is when pill medicine, when the side effects of pill medicine interfere with a person's goals or dreams or their personal medicine that keeps them well. So say being a good parent is important, and it's very powerful personal medicine for a person that keeps them well. And pill medicine makes you groggy, so you can't be there for your children. Then there's going to be some conflict about whether or not a person wants to take the meds. So it's a very individualized thing, but it's not our job to convince people or to get people to take their meds or to get people to really do anything other than identify their own personal dreams.
Okay, how can peer specialists negotiate their roles as unique with their supervisors so that they don't wind up doing gopher work?
Okay, so the question is, how can peer specialists negotiate with their supervisors that their position is unique so they don't end up doing gopher work? And that's a great question. And what I would suggest is the key word there was negotiate. So I would start off by having a conversation with the supervisor around, and pointing out what your strengths are. What is that unique thing that you're talking about, and really start working on trying to negotiate a job description based on, if you don't have a job description right now, a job description based on what those unique qualities are, instead of doing the gopher work. So If there's anything that this office can do to support that, you can certainly, my phone number and my email address is going to be at the end of this, so people can write me there. I just had a guest come in, Candace Stellato, and we had thanked her in the beginning, so I just want to say thank you right now to Candace for inviting us to do the listening forum. So, all right, next question.
Page 8, should I carry a caseload like all other staff because at this time I have the largest on the team?
Okay, so I'm assuming that this is an ACT team, and should I carry a caseload like all the other staff? My understanding is that if a person is a full participant on the ACT team and a full participant on the staff, that would be their job. So if everyone else has a full caseload, then that person would have a full caseload too. People would also carry a beeper and do whatever else is expected of everyone else on the team. If you're a full participant of the team, then yeah.
Okay, can you explain more about the statement on slide 7? People in the jobs previously had crack-ups.
Okay. I'll go back to slide 7. So what that meant was that there were people who were hired as peer specialists, and what they mean by crack-ups is they started having some problems, and they were unable to fulfill their duties in the job. So a clinical term for that would be people decompensated. Other people say people got sick, but they either said some things or did some things, or something happened where they were unable to continue working in the job in the capacity of peer specialists, and they were either fired, or the person ended up resigning, or they were hospitalized and weren't able to come back, or something along those lines. So hopefully that answers your question.
And this is a statement just to share with people. As a peer specialist, I still go to therapy and also a recipient, which makes this a unique as a role model.
Okay.
Live in the western region of the state, and I'm unfamiliar with ACT teams. Can you explain what they are?
Yep. Briefly, an ACT team is there are several specialists on the team. So there's usually a psychiatrist or a nurse practitioner. There's a team leader. There's an employment specialist, a family specialist, a substance abuse specialist, and it's essentially a hospital without walls. So traditionally, what the clientele that they serve are people where traditional treatment has not worked out for them that well. So it's a very personalized, very intensive approach. It's also an evidence-based practice. It's been proven to work and to help people get better.
Another helpful statement, one of the main things I think about in terms of being a role model is to model being respectful and treating people with kindness.
Okay. I'm not sure if everyone heard that. Can you say it again?
Basically, he was saying that as an ACT team role model, you show respect and kindness toward the people you're working with. That's the strongest way to lead as a role model.
Okay, so the person is saying that they lead as a role model by showing respect and kindness.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And compassion is a huge part of being a peer specialist. We have, and compassion literally means suffering with. So, many of us have had some pretty difficult experiences. Like I say, I refer to it as being in the dark forest. So we were able to relate to other people who are going through that. So compassion is obviously a huge quality for us. Yeah.
Do you have info about retention rate of peers on ACT? Does it differ from other staff?
I don't have that info now.
How can I get the OMH guidelines for an active peer specialist?
I don't think we have guidelines for ACT team peer specialists, and that was part of the reason why we were doing the listening forum. So what we'll do is after we've compiled this, I wanted to give this out to people. So after we've done that, what we'll do is put it up a little more formally for people, and we can send that out on a listserv for folks. There are some things in here that you'll see towards the end. I know we only got about half an hour left, so I think I'm going to, unless we got a couple more questions.
Got, I think, a couple of important ones here. Please
Okay.
say more about the issue of confidentiality between a peer specialist and a recipient he or she is working with.
Well, as far as confidentiality goes, from a legal point of view, it's still the same. It wouldn't change at all. But if you're talking about ethics and boundaries, there is where you're going to have some conversations with your agency around that. So it's really more of an agency kind of decision. How can people see people after hours? How much information are you expected to share with people? Do you do home phone numbers? Do you not do home phone numbers? Do you have people over your house? I mean, those are the things that people are going to have to figure out at their agency level. Some places have created a lot of rules around that, and that kind of works. I think values are a little bit more. I think setting up some values around that is a little bit better, because if you've got someone that you know is in crisis and you're on your way home and you're going to go by their house anyways, stopping in after hours and just checking in and saying, hey, what's up, and then going home, is that a violation, or is that, there could be a violation of a rule but not a violation of a value? So I would look for some values that you would want to put together for that. And we'll look into doing some trainings on ethics and boundaries too. So,
if a peer specialist relapses and goes into the hospital, how soon can he or she rejoin their team?
Again, that's really team specific. I mean, and it's very specific to the person. It's as long as they can do the essential functions of the job, they can come back. I mean, that's really the only criteria that I would think of. I can give you. I mean, there are people who have, not so much hospitalized, but there are peer specialists. There are peers who, can be psychotic and still working. And you could be at work and still psychotic or actively delusional. I mean, as long as you're able to do the essential functions of the job. And one of the story that I'm thinking of is it's a story from the Village out in California of a guy who was talking about, the person was visiting. So they were visiting the village, and the visitor saw a fellow there who was talking, actively delusional around, talking to Mick Jagger, and the night before, and that he was having Mick Jagger's baby, and so he was having a lot of things going on with him. And the visitor was wondering how long it would be before that person was going to be hospitalized. So when they ended up, when they got off the elevator and the elevator doors opened up, who was answering the phones but the guy with the Mick Jagger fixation? And he was perfectly able to just, hello, Village, how may I direct your call? Okay, So as long as you're able to do the job, that's really the main thing.
What roles do your peer recovery specialists have in treatment planning in terms of advocating?
I'm sorry, say that again?
What roles do your peer recovery specialists have in treatment planning in terms of advocating for the client's voice, helping the staff avoid compliance-based goals, focusing on wellness recovery concepts?
Yeah, I think the question is how do peers work into the picture with treatment planning with the rest of the team to help keep things on track with recovery-based goals rather than compliance-based goals. And I think that's an excellent question. And I think that's pretty, pretty crucial to what peer specialists do. You have the conversation. So I mean, treatment planning doesn't happen. I'm not naive enough to think that treatment planning doesn't happen without a person's input, because obviously it does sometimes. But what that would be a peer specialist job is to advocate for that person to be first of all, at the treatment planning session while that's happening, and to keep the team recovery focused. So that's part of our job, is to link things up to the bigger picture. So people can have behaviors, and people can have symptoms, and that behaviors are generally choices that people make to deal with symptoms. So helping people kind of understand that we don't want to focus just on symptoms and behaviors, but we want to focus on, well, what is, if somebody drinks to stop the voices, or somebody cuts to stop the voices, that's a behavior to deal with a symptom, right? So if somebody, if that's what the team is kind of focused on, or that's where people are framing things, the bigger picture here for the peer specialist to bring up would be, well, what is it that the person wants to do with their life, and is cutting helping or harming, or is it neutral? What does that person want to do with their life is really the question. What is that person's hopes and dreams and goals? So I'm going to move on now, because I don't want to miss the last pieces of this.
One more quick question is important, and that is, how can I find out about opportunities to become a peer specialist?
Well, we've got a
Question.
Yeah.
People have a hard time hearing.
Yeah. The question is, how do you find out about opportunities to become a peer specialist? So there's two different levels, and I'm going two main categories. One is state peer specialists and community peer specialists. So the state peer specialists are the ones that work for OMH. The community peer specialists work out in the community generally with not-for-profit agencies. And there are two separate sets of criteria for applying for those jobs. The state one does have some specific criteria, and I think I actually have the job description for the state one, so I can send that out on the peer specialist listserv if people are interested in that. But I don't have a list of when things are coming up. That I don't have. But what we can do is when we get information, what happens from time to time is when jobs become available, people send it to us. They come to recipient affairs, and we do have a couple of listserv. One is a recipient affairs listserv, and the other one is a peer specialist listserv, and we send it out on that. So I would suggest the person join either the recipient affairs listserv or the peer specialist listserv. All right, so here are some strategies after hiring. Some of the traps that people can fall into, or some of the unhelpful roles that people can fall into, is tokenism. And I'll just most people probably know what these mean, but I'll just briefly describe it. Tokenism is, you're just hired just to basically make people look good. So you become a token, and you're not really actively engaged on the team. A spokesperson for everyone with a mental illness. So you become the one person who can speak for everyone with a mental illness, and that's not necessarily true. Obviously, it's a very personal thing. There are some general things that we can relate to, but we can't be a spokesperson for every single person. Co-optation, and this is the big one for me, anyways. Is you start becoming more like the people around you. It's just a sociological fact. I mean, it's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that a person's bad or anything like that, but it's just you start becoming like the people that you're surrounded by. Paternalism. That means acting like a parent, acting protective of people. That's something that can happen. We can end up with that, not to get too clinical here, but with that transferring our own stuff onto someone else, or some counter-transference, that kind of stuff. And then again, another unhelpful role is being a medication salesperson. Some of the ongoing challenges, dealing with illness and time off. Sometimes some of us need a little bit extra time off. But they, they still call them mental health days as far as I know, so that's not that unusual. Boundaries, boundaries can be very slippery. We need to make sure that we are open. If we start doing things in secret, that's the one general rule or the one general value that I would share with people is just if we start doing things in secret, we're heading down a path that is very risky. So entitlements, getting equal pay for what we do. Maintaining our connection to the peer and recovery community. That can really help out with that whole co-optation thing. So we don't get co-opted and become part of the machine, and we maintain our integrity as peer specialists. We maintain our unicorn-like quality. And again, as I said before, that's an ADA consideration that people can go to recovery and peer specialist conferences as part of an ADA thing. And then to create a career path and have some career development. Excuse me. Ongoing supervision and support. So we want to maintain the unique advantages of the position. We want to provide ongoing staff support. And there's another thing on the other recommendation slide about that. We want to ensure professional development of people. So that's a good question for a supervisor to ask any staff, let alone the peer staff. What is the person's long-term career goal, and how can we help that person with that long-term career goal? I told my boss here that I wanted to do what he does in another state. Then I saw what he does, and now I've changed my career goal. And I told him that what I want to do now is I want to sweep the floors at a sheltered workshop. That is my new career goal. So some other recommendations. Access to the listserv. The ACT teams all have a listserv. And some of the peer specialists didn't know about that, and we're not on the listserv. So we recommended that everyone have access to the listserv, to the ACT team listserv. Full participants on the team. This kind of goes to one of the questions that we had a little earlier, that including the on-call responsibilities, paperwork, whatever the rest of the team does, people are equal partners in that. In New York City, it seemed that there were enough peers to have regular meetings at the field office, so our recommendation was to do that. We do that with adult home peer specialists, and we feel that that would be a good thing for people to do in New York City. And to promote professional development and support via existing conferences. NIAPRS has conferences, MAHAP has conferences. There's an alternatives conference, as I said, that's going to be in I think Kansas this year. There's a peer specialist conference down in the city. Some other recommendations. ACT team peer specialists can bridge with other peer specialists. So this is another way to maintain in the community. I'm just trying to catch up here. So there's what we're looking to do at some point, although this was written before the current budget crisis, is to do a statewide peer specialist conference. How doable that is right now, I don't know. We did create a peer specialist listserv, and there's some work on a support website, but I think that's going to be a little bit down the road. We would recommend that people attend recipient advisory committee meetings. So we have a statewide recipient advisory committee meeting. In the past, it's quarterly, but in the past it's always been in Albany. Now we're expanding it so it's in each of the regions and will be connected through video conferencing. So if people, and that's, it's open to the public, people can get in touch with the regional staff person to attend that, and if you're not sure who your regional recipient affairs specialist is, again, you can call me and I can advise you who to talk to. And then in each region there are peer networking groups. That's another way to stay on top of things and stay connected to the peer community, stay connected to the recovery community. These were the core competencies, and someone I think had asked a little bit about this earlier. So these were the core competencies that came from the recipients. These were what they felt they needed. Communication. Obviously you need good communication skills. A good background in recovery. That includes, person person first language, good recovery skills, how to activate and utilize and maximize your own unique experience, benefits and Social Security. Having, most people have been on some kind of public assistance or some kind of benefits. There's a lot of, it's a bureaucracy, so it's got some good things about it, but it's mostly difficult to just to deal with. So, and people aren't always knowledgeable about that. So we do have some trainings that we do around that, some very helpful trainings that are specific to people with psychiatric disabilities, and I've got the dates of those on this this webinar. So that's coming up. Ethics, again, we talked about ethics, we talked about negotiating boundaries. Those are things that are core competencies that people are going to need to have, I think, to be successful. Or not that I think, but that this is what the recipients or the peer specialists themselves thought. Listening skills, the lost art of listening. Sometimes just listening to what somebody is saying is enough, and people usually have the answers themselves. Most of us, I think, would agree that we had the answers ourselves. We just needed some time to kind of pull the threads out, and unknot them. So, and get rid of some of the things that we didn't need. So, and having someone listen is crucial to that. And then there's formal peer specialist training. So there's different, there's in all of the different regions, there's different ones. So these were two of the bigger ones. Howie the Harp down in New York City does some excellent work with peer specialist training. The Mental Health Empowerment Project does a lot of trainings around peer specialists and natural supports and recovery. And I believe that they're going to be doing something on natural supports, a webinar over the summer. So we'll be having Isaac come in and helping us out with that. So for people who are either, the core competencies here, what we're talking about is when there's a curriculum around training peers. If you're going to do if people are going to do a peer specialist training to teach people how to be peer specialists, we want to avoid curriculum that focuses on clinical criteria such as symptoms, meds, and their side effects and diagnoses. Peers may need to know some of the basics around that, but speaking as sort of like mini clinicians it's not a helpful role for us because it doesn't make us unique or special at all. So most of the training should really focus on relationship building, mutual partnerships, and integrating into the community. Peers in the fidelity scale. So just for some people who may not understand what this means, ACT teams are an evidence-based practice. So even an evidence-based practice could be delivered in a way that isn't particularly good. So one way to keep people on track is they have what they call a fidelity scale. And basically that's just a set of things that hold the ACT team or hold an evidence-based practice to a gold standard. So there's usually like what they call kind of a Likert scale. So you get like a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 based on different things that have been determined to be the most beneficial for people to do better in their lives. So this is just an excerpt from it. So what I did is I pulled some of the things, and you can see that they're quotes. So these are quotations. So for people with some stuff around language, please forgive the language, but these are in quotes. And what I did is I just pulled some of the things that I thought were naturally helpful for peers. So this is pretty specific to ACT teams. So I wanted people to understand what a fidelity scale was and what an evidence-based practice is. So peers, their natural strengths can be tied to the Dartmouth. This is the Assertive Community Treatment Scale. They call it the DAX. So there's a no dropout policy. So if there's a no dropout policy with the agency, they would get like a 5, I think is how they grade it. It's like that's the best you could do. So that's what we're looking for right now is what's the best that somebody could do. So, and that peers could help with this, doing outreach both initially before a person comes onto the ACT team and after the client is on the ACT team, helping build relationships with that person, helping them get connected, and ensure clients receive ongoing services. that's something that we think a peer specialist could help with. Assertive engagement mechanisms. So clients are not immediately discharged from the program due to failure to keep appointments. Retention of clients is a high priority for ACT teams. Persistent, caring attempts to engage clients in treatment helps foster a trusting relationship between the client and the ACT team. And again, most of the people on ACT teams are people who have not done well in traditional services. We also have a lot of people who are on AOT, assisted outpatient treatment, are on ACT teams, which is a legal situation. Assertive outreach is considered a critical feature of the ACT team. And again, peers I think are naturally inclined to do outreach and engagement with people. Intensity of service. In order to help clients with severe and persistent symptoms maintain and improve their function within the community, high service intensity is often required. So that's maybe a long period of time with someone and frequent visits. And this one is the one that I always highlight when I presented this back to the team leaders. Sometimes we didn't always get to the fidelity scale, but I always made sure I highlighted this one. This one is really, from my point of view, the most important. Working with informal support system. So the program provides support and skills for clients' informal support network, i.e. persons not paid to support the client, such as family, landlord, shelter staff, employer, or other key person. And the rationale for that is developing and maintaining community support further enhances clients' integration and functioning. So what that means is just helping people develop, a role in the community, a role outside of the mental health system, and just developing a role in the community. Because we all have different roles that we have. We all have different masks that we wear, and for some folks. Being a mental patient is a role that people play, but then when they're not in that environment anymore, they have a different mask that they wear. So just learning how to be in the community in a different way and in a different role, and to practice those skills day to day, I think it's pretty important, because someday staff will leave, which is traumatic for some folks. Someday people are going to be graduated out through the ACT team, and what's that going to be like if you don't have family or work or some other kind of support system in place? So if paid staff are the only supports that you have, sooner or later I think that's going to lead to some discomfort for people. And then the role of, this is the last one here, the role of consumers on the treatment team. Peer specialists are not mandated to be on ACT teams. It's not a requirement, but it is recommended, and this is the recommendation. So consumers are members of the team who provide direct services. Some research has concluded, and this is kind of a duh moment, but some research has concluded that including consumers as staff on case management teams improves the practice culture, making it more attuned to consumer perspectives, and that's obviously one of our main roles. So here's my information. So we're gonna work on wrapping up here. We got about 5 minutes left.
Anybody whose questions were not answered, feel free to email them.
Yeah, anyone whose questions were not answered, you can email them, and I think we can even generate a report and answer them in the report and then send that out. So here's my phone number. Here's my my email address, and I did send out a PDF of the presentation prior to the webinar, but I don't think I got everybody. It's still kind of a work in progress, so I appreciate people's patience as we work through this. I got a couple other things, so before you head out, just give me a minute here. Here's the peer specialist listserv. So if people want to be on the peer specialist listserv and get information, you can just send an email to that. If people want to be on the recipient affairs listserv, and there is some duplicity or duplication there between the two, because we do tend to, whatever we send out on the recipient affairs listserv, we tend to send out on the peer specialist listserv as well, but certainly you can be on both. The peer specialist listserv is primarily for peer specialists, obviously. I'm sorry, there's one thing that I forgot to mention when it came to recommendations. One of the other recommendations to help people, to help peer specialists connect with each other, have dialogue with each other, start forming some strategies around different things, to share ideas with each other, to brainstorm, is doing video conferencing. So we want to do some quarterly video conferencing, and we're currently well, you know, this is a bureaucracy, so we've got the paperwork in now to try and get it done, and hopefully it'll be something that we'll be able to do over the summertime, and we can start doing quarterly video conferencing with peer specialists so they can connect with each other. Let's see. All right. I couldn't send this particular document out because of copyright concerns, but you can email the link. So. Or you can promote the link. So this is a link. The name of the article is Mental Health Consumer Providers. It's an excellent technical report, and I would suggest that people take a look at that. Here's the benefits training. This is a free benefits training. It's a 2-day training. The next one coming up, obviously, is in February. We do them basically every month, and for more information or to register, you can contact Tom O'Clair, and his email address is up at the top there. And this is a first. Today was the first of a series of webinars. We're planning on doing these every month, so it'll be the last Wednesday of every month. And our next one is going to be on outpatient rights. And it's an overview of the rights of adults in all outpatient programs run or licensed by the New York State Office of Mental Health. I will be presenting that one, and then we'll have guests coming in for the rest of the year. So you don't have to listen to me every month. So that's Wednesday, February 25th from 1 to 2:30. Again, to register, we'll go to this. It'll be the same. The audio will be the same for all of these. All of the webinars throughout the year. The audio information will be the same for every single one of them. So this is also already posted up on the OMH website. So you can just go to our homepage, and where it says, I think it says webcast. There's a little tab that says webcast. If you click on that, you'll see the registration information for this particular training. And then in March we'll have one. The Bureau of Cultural Competence will be providing that one, and then in April we'll have people from NIAPers coming to present the We Can Work initiative that they're doing. That's helping people get back to work, and they're doing a great job with that. As soon as we close out here, people will get a short survey to fill out. It's about 8 questions. If people want to get a certificate of attendance, I'm going to need you to fill those out, put your address in there so we can mail that off to you. And that's the end of it. So I hope everyone enjoyed their time today. I hope this was informative and helpful for people. I'm very excited about doing these, and I want to thank Candace and NIAPers and all the people that helped put this together. Part of these webinars, part of the reason why we're doing these webinars is actually because of the peer specialist listening forums. This was something that kind of came out of that to help people start networking, talking, getting used to technology, getting some training under their belt, some free trainings under their belt to add their resumes, to add to their resumes. And I couldn't think of a better way to start these off than with the peer specialist. Training. So thank you very much. We got a couple of minutes, so if you want to do a couple of questions.
If you would repeat how they can get a certificate of attendance?
Yep. When we close this out, what's going to happen is you'll get a survey. I'm not sure exactly. I'm not sure if just a new window pops up or if you get it in the email. I apologize. I'm just not sure about that right now. But you'll get a survey of about 8 questions, like did this meet your needs, and so on and so forth. And then it'll ask a question, did you want a certificate of attendance? And if you click yes, it'll ask you'll need to put your address in there. So just put your address in there and we'll mail it to you. That's for people who didn't hear the question. The question was, how do you get the certificate of attendance? So that's how you get the certificate of attendance. Please just fill out the survey.
Peer specialists and documentation, are they the same documentation requirements? How does the peer specialist learn how to document?
Okay, so the question is, how does a peer specialist learn how to document? I don't know. As the gears turn up here, my thought would be to obviously to work with the supervisor if you're already working with someone. The other thing you could do is you can look through people's charts and kind of see how things have been documented. Although they're not those aren't necessarily they may or may not be in recovery language, so that may not be a good place to go either. I'm going to actually take a note, and maybe documentation is something that we would want to talk about. Maybe that might be a training, a webinar series that we want to do. So that's a good question. I hadn't really thought about that.
Does the state hire forensic peer specialists with a criminal history?
Yep. We do. We have them.
People have a hard time hearing me.
Yeah. The question was, does the state hire forensic peer specialists? And the answer is yes. I spoke a little bit about that earlier. We have hired forensic peer specialists because we have people in our forensic facilities. So we have forensic peer specialists working for us right now in our forensic facilities. And we had advocated, because there was a little bit of advocating that we had to do because we had mentioned that people do have there's a criminal background check that has to be done. And actually, we have guidance documents on doing criminal background checks for peers, and that came out of this office and forensics. I forget the name of the woman that worked on it with us, but I can send that document out on the listserv. I'll send it out like in a week or so to give people some time to join our listserv. It should be also on the website somewhere. So if you don't get it on the listserv, send me an email and I'll send it to you. It's not a problem. That's a good question. All right, I'll do one more question and then we'll bid people adieu for today.
Okay, can you please expand on what you mean by utilization of uniqueness of a peer specialist role?
Sure. The unique, what we want to do with the peer specialist is people. The idea here is that we have a lived experience of mental illness, that we have traveled into that particular land, or as I call it, the dark forest. And that what's most important is that we've been able to come back out of that place, and we've been able to talk about it and describe the landscape of what that looks like. So we can describe that for providers. We can help providers understand what a person might be experiencing. We can help them understand with some trauma-informed practices. If there are some housing providers that will key in on people for their safety, if they hadn't heard from them in a few days, but if you just kind of key in on somebody without knocking first or calling first or trying to get in touch with a person or making your presence known, that can be a very, very traumatic thing for some people. So, those are the kinds of examples. That's the kind of stuff that we can do to help providers understand what that's like, what that experience is like. And then we can also, on the flip side, we can also help people who are still in the early stages of their recovery. We can help them understand, where providers are coming from sometimes. So, and then it's not necessarily just all that people actually do try to help. People are actually trying to help. So sometimes it gets convoluted a little bit. So, alrighty. Well, thank you very much, folks. Any questions we didn't get to, we can do that via email. So I want to thank everyone very much for coming. And I know it's hard to sit at a computer for an hour and a half, so I really appreciate that from folks. Alrighty, I'm going to sign off now, and you'll be getting your survey. Take care now, everyone. Bye-bye. thank you.
We had
That's awesome.
Wow.
yeah, it started off at 77, and